We're really about 11 days into the season of Lent, really still just beginning our Lenten journey, headed to that glorious feast of the resurrection of Easter. Now, in some ways, we all began the same way. We began with Ash Wednesday as a church. And as a church and a parish, we're kind of headed in the same direction. But individually, we may have started at different places in our spiritual life, in our Catholic life, in our devotional life. But hopefully, eventually, we kind of get on the right path and the right direction. And you never know who on either side of you or in your family, where they begin or where they're at in their journey. And we have to be careful not to become too critical of that. So to illustrate that, I'd like to share a little story that I had shared on Friday with those who came to Mass. But I'd like to do so again. A number of years ago, I was in a men's group, a little men's group. And it was about right now, the beginning of Lent, and we were kind of sharing what kind of devotions we were doing, what we gave up, what kind of journey we were on with our families. And one of the men said, well, I've cut down on my video game time. And instead of playing 6 hours a day, I play 1 hour a day. So most of us looked at him with a certain amount of indignance, like, what? You're a grown man? You still play 1 hour a day of video games? But then he said again, but I used to play 5 or 6. And then another man chimed in and said, well, I used to play 10 hours a day of video games, and it cost me my marriage. And after a little bit of awkward silence, another man said, well, you're both headed in the right direction. You're headed in the right direction. We never know who the person on either side of us, where they are at and where they started. There are many people today, or men in the scriptures today, that have different paths, start different places, and God calls them to different things. But each of their paths are difficult, but somewhere along the line, they do have a kind of a heavenly experience, a profound experience of God that sends them off to a further journey. We hear in Genesis of Abraham, our father in faith. God calls him out from his comfort zone. Go forth from the land of your kinsfolk. My guess is he probably wanted to stay there, live out his life, be comfortable. But God called him out, and part of his journey was, we know, brutal. As he walked up with his son Isaac on Mount Carmel there, and thought that he was going to have to sacrifice his own son. I can't imagine the awfulness of that. But by the same token, within a few minutes, he was flooded with relief in heaven when God told him, no, don't sacrifice your son, I'll sacrifice mine. And then sent him off to a further journey. We know that Moses, very famous, God called him out. Said, now I need you to go lead my people. You go lead them. And we hear he said, I'd rather not. Pick somebody else. I don't know how to speak well. They're not going to listen to me. Do it anyway. And we know that long journey that he made, well, part of it was very difficult. But there were moments on that journey where God became very real to them as he parted the Red Sea, dropped manna from the sky, and had water come from a rock. But we also know there were times in that journey where Moses said, if this is what's going to be like, kill me now. It was a tough journey. Moments of grace, but moments of desert, moments of trial, moments he was wishing death itself. But he kept on his journey and kept moving. And when on Mount Tabor we hear, they see Elijah also called out of his homeland to be a prophet. And he had a profound experience of God when he was battling the priests of Baal, and fire came down and consumed the fire. And even the priests of Baal, the pagans, were yelling out, "The Lord is God, the Lord is God." He had victory and conversion. But he headed out because someone was chasing him, wanting to kill him. He'd hide out in a cave. God still had things for him to do, set him out on journey. And in moments in his life were amazing mountaintop experiences. Others were difficult, all headed in the right direction, trusting in God that he would send them in the right direction. Now today we have, one of the mysteries of the Rosary, the Transfiguration. A lot going on here, a lot. So let's look at that. You have Jesus, the God-man, goes to three of his apostles, not all of them, just three, Peter, James, and John, the sons of thunder. And doesn't say, "Hey, come with me, let's have some coffee. Come with me, let's go for a walk, let's have some lunch." That's not what he said. He said, "You three, I need you to climb this mountain with me." I imagine they would just as soon stayed there. Why do we have to go? If any of you have been to the Holy Land and been to Mount Tabor, that's a big hill. We usually go up on a bus. Nobody walks up that thing. Not anymore. And I can imagine them trudging up that thing going, "Why are we doing this?" Only to reach the top and have an experience of heaven. The inner life of the Trinity. A taste of heaven. Where they see Jesus transfigured. His full divinity is on display. The cloud of the Holy Spirit comes upon them and envelops them. And they hear the Father's voice. "This is my Son. Listen to him." They're right there in heaven, in the midst of God. To the point where they drop down and want to just stay. Can we build some tents here? Can we build a tabernacle here? And the answer was no. No, we got to go back down, get down, and head on our journey again. Only this time, they were on their way to Jerusalem. This is sort of Jesus' one of his last moments where he's starting to take them in a direction they'd rather not go. They know that Jesus hated in Jerusalem, and that's where he heads. Back on the journey. Let's continue this journey and let us head in the right direction. Now, I would also say there are many people in this room, I think, that have had profound mountaintop transfiguration experiences. Whether it's on a retreat or a conference, maybe you've had it when you come out of confession. Maybe you've actually gone on pilgrimage and you've had a powerful encounter with Christ and your life is never the same. But I would say God allows that to happen so that when things are tough, you remember. When you head out towards your cross and carry your cross, to remember that. I think that Jesus allowed them to see him at his best, totally transfigured, transformed in his divinity, to see him at his best, because they're about to see him at his worst. And for one of them, it worked. John never abandoned him. So when you have tough times, there are times that I have really profound, privileged experiences as a priest. Yesterday, in a small little ceremony, I got to marry a couple. Now that's awesome, it's beautiful. But during the wedding itself, during the marriage, the man became Catholic. I heard his profession of faith. I confirmed him and gave him First Eucharist, and I married him. It's awesome. It's beautiful. It's privileged. It's a blast. But then this morning, the gate wouldn't open. Those things are frustrating. It happens. We keep moving despite these little setbacks. To remember that continue it on whatever our pilgrimage is. It started right in here for most of us, smearing ashes on our foreheads and heading out towards Easter. But I think we have to be very careful and not be as critical as we were when someone says something like, well, I've cut down on my video games. Because you never know, for many of you, a conversion starts with just coming to Mass on Sundays, going to confession for the first time. Maybe if you're headed in the right direction, for you it means stepping on that scale in the morning, hoping that number goes in the right direction. That's real. For others, maybe they're making huge decisions in their life. Some people in this congregation will be baptized at the Easter Vigil. That's where their pilgrimage will end. But only liturgically, because in their personal life, God will send them out. And all of you here, you had different journeys just getting here to the Mass. Maybe you had to fight with your kids. Maybe you had to fight with your spouse. Maybe you had to fight with your body because that bed felt good in the morning. And you drive past that Shipley's Donuts, and it's hard to keep going. But I very much admire, and there are people here right now, when I come out of the back and I see people coming up the parking lot in a wheelchair or with a cane or with a walker. Their journey here was much more arduous than mine. And they're keeping going. They're keeping going. We had someone at the last Mass whose husband died of 64 years, died last night. And she came to Mass this morning. She's my hero. She's headed in the right direction. But it starts again with here at the Mass, because at the Mass we have a more even profound, intimate encounter with Christ than these three men did. A nuptial encounter with Christ that sends us back out on mission. So as we continue with sacrament and prayer and community, wherever we're at, hopefully we're headed back on our journey and headed in the right direction.